Genghis Khan conquered kingdoms, shattered armies, and founded an empire that transformed the map of Eurasia. Yet the location of his own body became something no army, archaeologist, or satellite has been able to conquer. There is no confirmed grave, no monument bearing his name, no chamber that scholars can point to with certainty. Nearly 8 centuries after his death, the final resting place of one of history's most powerful rulers remains hidden. And the strangest possibility is that this is not an archaeological failure. It may be the result of a decision that has survived for generations. In 1227, Genghis Khan was campaigning against the Western Xia kingdom in northern China. By then, the man born as Temujin had united rival Mongol peoples, built a disciplined military system, and created the foundation of an empire that his descendants would expand across much of Eurasia. Then, during the campaign, he died. Even the cause remains uncertain. Later accounts proposed illness, injuries from a fall, an arrow wound, and other increasingly dramatic explanations. None can be confirmed. The secret history of the Mongols, the most important early Mongolian narrative of his life, reduces the moment to a single solemn idea. In the year of the boar, Genghis Khan ascended to heaven. What happened to his body afterward is even less certain. Tradition says it was transported north, across an immense distance, toward the Mongolian homeland. From that point, history begins to dissolve into legend. One story claims that anyone who saw the funeral procession was killed. Another says that thousands of horses trampled the ground until every trace of the grave disappeared. Some versions describe trees planted over the site. Others claim that a river was redirected across it. These stories are repeated so often that they can sound like documented fact. They are not. The most violent versions appear in later traditions and in accounts written long after Genghis Khan's death. They reveal how people imagined the secrecy surrounding the burial, but they do not prove what actually happened. The silence of the earliest sources is more important than the spectacle of the legends. For Mongol rulers, an ancestor's grave was not simply a place containing bones and objects. It could represent lineage, legitimacy, and spiritual power. To reveal such a place was to expose it to enemies, looters, and desecration. Hiding it may therefore have been an act of protection rather than theatrical cruelty. Genghis Khan had spent his life becoming visible across the known world. In death, everything was reversed. His body disappeared, the landscape closed around him, and the empire preserved almost no clear route back. But one name continued to return through the centuries. A mountain where Temujin had once escaped his enemies. A mountain he regarded as sacred. A mountain whose forests may still be guarding the answer. Burkhan Khaldun. Burkhan Khaldun rises in northeastern Mongolia, where the open Central Asian steppe meets the dark, coniferous forests of the Siberian taiga. Rivers descend from the Khenti Mountains. Snow remains on the higher ground. Forests, marshes, wind, and distance make the region difficult to cross, even with modern equipment. For the Mongols, however, its importance is not merely geographical. The secret history links the mountain to a crucial moment in the life of Temujin. Pursued by enemies, he found refuge in its wilderness. After surviving, he honored the mountain and the eternal blue heaven. Burkhan Khaldun became associated with safety, transformation, and the destiny of the future Genghis Khan. This connection matters because later historical traditions placed his burial in the same sacred landscape. The Persian historian Rashid al-Din, writing in the early 14th century, associated the imperial burial ground with Burkhan Khaldun. Mongolian traditions also connected the mountain with the graves of the royal family. But identifying a mountain is not the same as finding a tomb. The wider region became known as Ikh Khorig, often translated as the Great Taboo or the Great Forbidden Sanctuary. Royal burial and hunting grounds were separated from ordinary settlement. Access was restricted, and guardian families are said to have protected the territory across generations. This provides a more credible explanation for the enduring mystery than the legend of an entire funeral escort being massacred. A grave does not need a supernatural curse when it is hidden inside a remote, protected landscape and surrounded by a culture that considers disturbance unacceptable. The mountain remains sacred today. It is associated with ancient forms of nature and mountain worship, later intertwined with Buddhist practices. Pilgrims approach stone cairns, known as ovos, leave blue ceremonial scarves, and treat the land itself as spiritually alive. In 2015, the Great Burkhan Khaldun Mountain and its surrounding sacred landscape became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The protected property covers more than 440,000 hectares, with an additional buffer zone. Traditional rules prohibit disturbing the soil, water, trees, plants, and animals of sacred places. On the mountain itself, activities beyond worship and necessary conservation have long been restricted. That creates an extraordinary problem for archaeology. No reliable description tells researchers what Genghis Khan's burial should look like. Medieval Mongolian funerary practices were not uniform. Archaeological evidence shows both burial and cremation in the broader region before and around the period of the Mongol Empire. An elite warrior might have been placed in a wooden coffin with riding equipment and weapons. Another possibility is a simpler burial, wrapped in felt beneath unmarked earth. Some traditions even leave open the possibility of exposure on a high mountain. There may be no stone entrance, no pyramid, no visible mound, no treasure chamber waiting behind a decorated door. The tomb could be deep beneath a forested slope, concealed by natural erosion and centuries of vegetation. It could also be somewhere outside Burkhan Khaldun entirely. The search is therefore not for a needle in a haystack. It is for an object whose shape is unknown, inside a vast landscape that many people believe should never be opened. And yet, modern explorers tried to look without touching the ground. During the early 1990s, a joint Mongolian and Japanese research effort known as the Burkhan Khaldun Project surveyed areas connected with the imperial history of the Mongols. Researchers used maps, aerial observation, satellite data, and remote sensing to search for patterns that might indicate buried structures. They documented important archaeological sites from several periods, but no discovery could be confirmed as the tomb of Genghis Khan. The problem was immense. A buried chamber might produce only a slight change in vegetation, soil moisture, or surface shape. In a landscape of mountains, forests, and geological anomalies, nature can create thousands of convincing false signals. Then, the search entered the digital age. Beginning in the late 2000s, researcher Albert U. Min Lin and the Valley of the Khans project proposed a non-invasive approach. Instead of immediately excavating sacred ground, the team combined high-resolution satellite imagery, unmanned aerial vehicles, ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, and other surveying technologies. The public was invited to help examine satellite images for anything that appeared unusual. More than 10,000 online volunteers contributed around 30,000 hours of work. Together, they examined approximately 6,000 square kilometers and produced more than 2 million feature classifications. Field teams investigated the strongest accessible anomalies and verified 55 archaeological locations from periods ranging from the Bronze Age to the Mongol era. That was a remarkable achievement. It also demonstrated the limits of technology. The project found artifacts, including fragments of roof tiles, burned wood, and horse remains dating near the period of Genghis Khan. Researchers also examined a large mound and evidence of a ceremonial structure on high ground. Such findings suggest that important activities occurred in the sacred landscape, but none of them proves that Genghis Khan lies beneath it. Radar can reveal an anomaly. A satellite can identify a geometric shape. A drone can map terrain hidden from a person on the ground. None can read the name of the dead through meters of soil. Confirmation would probably require physical investigation, and that is precisely where science meets the boundary of culture. The question is no longer whether technology is powerful enough to find suspicious locations. The question is whether researchers have the right to open them. Online, photographs of unrelated ruins and other ancient tombs are repeatedly presented as the grave of Genghis Khan. In Inner Mongolia, the famous Genghis Khan mausoleum serves as a place of commemoration, but it is not his confirmed burial site. Every few years, a new headline announces that the mystery may have been solved. None has produced accepted evidence. Even a genuine chamber would create another challenge. Without a clear inscription or securely identified remains for comparison, proving the identity of its occupant could be difficult. And if the burial were simple, as some historians suspect, the most famous lost tomb in history might contain far less gold than popular imagination demands. Its true value would not be treasure, it would be the power to transform a sacred absence into a physical object, something that could be photographed, studied, displayed, and perhaps exploited. For many Mongolians, that would not feel like solving a mystery. It could feel like breaking a promise. To much of the outside world, the tomb of Genghis Khan is an unfinished puzzle. Archaeology is expected to uncover what time has hidden. Satellites should locate the anomaly. Radar should reveal the chamber. History should surrender its final secret. But Burkhan Khaldun presents a different idea of history. The sacred landscape is not empty simply because a tomb has not been excavated. Its isolation, rituals, forests, rivers, and restrictions are themselves part of the historical record. The continued refusal to disturb the mountain may be as meaningful as anything buried beneath it. Genghis Khan remains a profoundly complex figure. In Mongolia, he is remembered as the founder who united peoples and created a state. Across other regions, his armies are remembered for conquest, destruction, and immense human suffering. A tomb would not resolve that contradiction. It would become another place where national memory, scholarship, tourism, politics, and commerce compete for control. If researchers found the grave, the discovery could reveal extraordinary information. Human remains might offer clues about his age, health, ancestry, and cause of death. Objects could illuminate imperial craftsmanship, warfare, belief, and contact across Eurasia. The burial might also help archaeologists identify other royal Mongol graves that remain unknown. But discovery has consequences. Once the location became public, protecting it would be almost impossible. Roads, visitors, cameras, treasure hunters, political claims, and international attention would follow. The very isolation that preserved the place could disappear. Modern archaeology increasingly recognizes that descendant communities are not obstacles to research. They are participants whose values and consent matter. A site can be scientifically important and still remain unopened. Perhaps that is why the mystery has survived every empire that rose after the Mongols. The grave may not be protected by assassins, a diverted river, or a supernatural curse. It may be protected by something more durable: geography, cultural memory, and a collective decision not to dig. Somewhere among the Khenti Mountains, there may be a wooden coffin beneath tangled roots. There may be weapons and riding equipment resting in darkness. There may be only felt, earth, and the remains of a man whose name once terrified kingdoms. Or perhaps Burkhan Khaldun is only the center of the legend, while the true burial lies far beyond every area researchers have searched. Nearly 800 years after his death, the world still does not know. And that may have been the intention from the beginning. Genghis Khan spent his life making sure the world could not ignore him. His final victory may have been ensuring that no empire, government, or generation could ever possess his grave. The greatest conqueror of the medieval world became history's most carefully protected absence. Thank you for watching. If this story made you see the world from a different perspective, Subscribe to Silent Nature Mysteries. More mysteries are waiting to be discovered.